Welcome everybody to our second Facebook Live. We're here today in Auburn again at this beautiful garden on a beautiful day. And we're celebrating National Garden Week this week. So some of you have been sitting at home for quite a while and exploring gardening in your backyard. And don't forget, this week is the week to go out there and check on everything and make sure you don't have a bunch of bugs, okay? So give me a like if you're celebrating National Garden Week as well. Okay. So today we're going to talk about citrus trees, okay? And we call it citrus, the sweet and the sour, because there's wonderful things about having citrus trees in your yard, but there's also some pests that can be a little annoying, right? So we're going to talk about both the positives and the negatives, okay? Before we get started, let me thank Placer County Water Agency. They're hosting this again, and I really appreciate that. My name is Kevin Marini, and I work for the University of California Cooperative Extension in Placer County, and I run a Master Gardener volunteer program. We do education and outreach throughout the community, and we are a free resource to our Placer County public. And so after this, if you have further questions, check us out and ask away, okay? And finally, we're going to take questions for this Facebook Live, but we're going to do it a little bit different than we did it before. So today, I want you to put your questions in the comments, and then after we kind of wrap things up, I'll address those questions in the comments, so we don't take away from the video time, okay? So that's the intro stuff. Let's get started talking about citrus trees, okay? I'm standing right in front of one right now, a real robust, beautiful one. First thing to consider, if you live in Placer County, then you live in an area that stretches from the valley floor in Lincoln all the way up the mountain to basically Tahoe, right? For the most part, our Master Gardener program really reaches out to the Lincoln area up to the Colfax area, about 3,000 feet. So if you're thinking about growing citrus in your yard and you live in Placer County, you may be in an area that can grow citrus without any concern about freezing weather. Or you may be in the upper elevations where a hard freeze could actually just wipe out your citrus tree, okay? In general, we say about 1,000 to 1,200 is the range. That's kind of like Auburn area. So if you're above 1,000 feet in elevation, you're going to have to take some measures to protect your citrus trees, okay, from cold if it's coming. Below 1,000 feet, obviously you can feel more comfortable about not having to worry about sudden death due to weather situation, okay? So another thing to know about gardening in Placer County, we have a very robust mountain mandarin industry, right? So we have all these commercial farms that are growing mandarins for our community. And so it's really important that we as home gardeners take care of our citrus trees so we don't let a pest or disease occur that could potentially impact our commercial vibrant mandarin industry. So if you're going to buy a citrus tree, I recommend you buy local, okay? Because all nurseries have stock that has been inspected. So you don't want to buy a citrus tree from outside the area and bring it into Placer County, because you could be bringing in pests that could do damage to our local mandarin industry. So buy local, and you'll get lots of good information at our local nurseries, okay? So let's say you bought a citrus tree and you're thinking about where to plant it. Now, in your yard, you may have microclimates, places that stay warmer or places that are colder, right? So in general, when you're planting a citrus tree, you want to choose a spot where the cold air can drain away from it, okay? So if you're in the foothills and you live on a hill, you're going to look to plant that tree at the top of the hill. If you're in a small backyard, you still may have a berm, or you could potentially create a raised garden bed and lift that up off the ground a little bit so that cold air can drain away from the tree and it kind of passively protects it. Okay, so that's a good tip. So raised beds are really popular as well because you can line the bottom of them and keep gophers away from your precious citrus trees, okay? And that's really important because gophers are a big pest of citrus trees, and it's very, very depressing to do the effort. You got this selected tree, you went through the effort of planting it, and all of a sudden a gopher comes and it's gone, right? So raised beds can be beneficial to protect against gophers as well. So let's talk about some of the cultural considerations when growing citrus trees, okay? So obviously citrus trees tend to be evergreen, okay? So that's nice, you have foliage year round. They also tend to be grafted. This is really important to understand. So you have what I will call a rootstock here as my left hand, and the actual variety of the citrus tree is a stick, if you will, that's grafted on top of the rootstock, okay? So there's actually a little spot right above the ground on the main stem where you can identify where that graft union is. Number one, it should not be buried underneath the ground, or it will likely just rot and your tree will fall over at some point. So don't make sure that graft union is above ground, number one. But also what happens is the rootstock is usually a variety that isn't an edible, chosen for its edible, characteristics, for its taste and yield and that sort of thing. So it will throw out shoots that compete with that top variety that's been grafted on. And in some cases, I've even seen how the main variety has completely died, and the only thing that's growing now is the weird variety of the rootstock. And then I get the phone call at the Master Gardener office saying, well, I have the most bizarre looking citrus fruits on my tree. And when they examine it, it's actually the tree is coming from the rootstock, not the actual grafted variety on top. So it's really, really important, and my master gardeners see that all the time. I actually bought a lemon tree for my parents years ago, and before I knew all this, and it turned out that that's exactly what happened. What ended up growing was the rootstock with these huge thorns and these bizarre looking fruit, right? So make sure you understand where that graft union is. The next thing we're going to talk about is watering. Obviously with citrus, they are shallow rooted. All their roots are in the top part of the soil, okay? And they do not like wet feet. They don't like to be waterlogged, okay? Because when you have soil saturated, then you don't have air in there, okay? And so a lot of times in the early spring, we will get calls from people saying, my citrus tree is yellowing, the leaves are yellowing, leaves are falling off. Some people report, later on in the season, fruit falling off. A lot of that has to do with watering. And it's not underwatering, it's overwatering, watering way too much, okay? And so be very careful about your watering with citrus trees. You do want to let the soil actually dry out a little bit in between waterings. So if you're going out to your citrus trees and watering them every day for 20 minutes, then that soil never has a chance to actually dry out and bring air back into the soil so roots can flourish, okay? So that's really, really important. You want to do infrequent, deep waterings, okay? Use water efficiently and you will have really healthy citrus trees like this one behind me, okay? Now, when you're doing your watering, you can use drip irrigation, right? You can use micro sprinklers. There's lots of different drip irrigation setups that you can use. And be aware that Placer County Water Agency has, number one, they have a water efficiency team that can help you become more water efficient in general, indoor and outdoors. But they also have a rebate program, which is really cool. So if you're thinking of switching your irrigation and you live in Placer County and PCWA is your water provider, guess what? They will come out and help you out, and they'll give you a rebate for switching to a more efficient irrigation system. So that's huge win-win. Bunch of likes, bunch of hearts for that one, okay? All right, so we're gonna move on to pests. This is kind of the whole sour part, but it's really important. Like I said, we have a big, citrus industry in this area, and the last thing we want is to allow a pest to come in and potentially impact that industry, right? So I'm asking you, Placer County gardeners, to don't just plant your citrus tree, go out and look at it, and actually turn over leaves and look in the branches and look for pests, okay? And that way, you can be proactive and not reactive when it comes to pests. So what are some of the most common pests, insects that we see with citrus? Well, most everyone knows what an aphid is. Little soft-bodied insect that sucks plant juices. Now, they can do a lot of damage, but the good news is they can be almost completely taken care of with just water and a nice firm spray of water, as long as you're monitoring and keeping on top of it and don't allow the population to get too big, okay? So using a spray of water, potentially if you needed to go up a next level, you could use an insecticidal soap product. We're all about starting from the least toxic method and moving up, because pesticide use in your home gardens has an impact on water quality, okay? And everyone wants clean water. We can all, thankfully, there's one thing we can all agree on: clean water, okay? So if you want clean water, then use pesticides wisely, because when we have spring rains and all that water is running off into our waterways, we don't want it carrying bad stuff into our waterways. So your pesticide use in your home garden has an impact on that, okay? So aphids, there's another pest called scale. They get on the stems of the tree and they kind of put a little armor over them so you can't get at them very easily. There's also this really interesting looking pest called a mealybug. Okay, so what we're going to do is, after this is through, we're going to put pictures into the comments so you can see these pests, because we can't like zoom in on them. Well, they're not here. This is so healthy. So you'll see what I'm talking about, and there'll be a link to our UC Integrated Pest Management IPM site, where they talk about the life cycles of pests and how to manage them and all that good stuff. So check the comments after we're done to see the pictures of those pests, okay? So some other common questions we get about citrus has to do with, you know, when do you harvest the actual fruit? So I definitely wanted to address that. It may be the case that you have to do some taste testing on your fruit to know when the best time to harvest them is, right? So it may be that you have a Meyer lemon tree that starts with little green fruits that eventually will get big and turn yellow, and then that's a pretty good marker that it's ready to pick. But if you're unsure, taste test, okay? It's okay to pick something and check it out. Even your tomatoes and peppers and all those different things, taste test a little bit. It's fun, right? Okay. So getting back to the irrigation part, I wanted to also bring up that mulch is an important component of any garden in Placer County in the summer. So it's June right now, and all that's going to happen for the next couple of months is going to get hotter and hotter. And what's really, really important, like I mentioned before, the citrus trees have shallow roots, right? They can, in a raised bed, soil can dry out really quickly. Mulch will help mitigate that situation. It helps keep water in, keeping it from evaporating, and that way, maybe not right now when it's just starting to heat up, but when we have days that are always in the 90s to 100s, using mulch, an organic material on the top of the soil to protect the soil and help preserve the moisture, is key. And it's going to go a long way to have healthy citrus trees. Okay? So, finally, I want to mention that the Placer County Master Gardeners have an annual calendar. It's their main fundraiser, and usually this calendar comes out in about September in the fall, and it has gardening tips for every month in there, and it also has feature articles. So watch for that this fall, so that in your gardens you have an idea of when to do things like fertilize, when to look for certain pests, when to prune, right? So let's wrap this up. I've given you a bunch of little tips, okay? And I want to kind of wrap this up saying that citrus trees are great for the home garden. Make sure you're in a climate where you understand if you have to protect it or not. That's really important. Make sure you're monitoring your trees, looking for these pests, and contacting the master gardeners if you have problems. And if you're thinking about pruning your citrus trees, in general, they get a little bit of skirt pruning usually, so bringing the branches up off the ground so leaves aren't touching the ground. That's one way they get pruned. And another way is to open up the canopy a little bit to get light on the fruit so that they ripen. Okay, so thank you so much for joining us today, and please, please, please don't forget, if you have questions, put them in the comment field, and then we will follow up with those questions. And I hope you enjoyed this Facebook Live, and happy National Gardening Week.